My name is ShadowRockZX, and since the year of 2008, I have been running this YouTube channel centered around Capcom's Mega Man. But the truth is, the iconic Blue Bomber has been my favorite hero since my earliest childhood gaming memories. Which Mega Man, you ask? All of them. Now, as an adult, armed with decades of experience from playing every mainline title, I am taking a trip through the deep log, in the order that I originally experienced the franchise. From the NES classics, through the cyber world, to the modern revivals, and even some obscure adventures in between. Join me as I rediscover how I fell in love with the series, and find out if my past feelings about these games still hold true today. This is my personal Mega Man journey, my Mega Memories.
Good luck.
Here's a fun way to date myself. I share a birth year with Mega Man X. The video game, mind you, not the century-old, Reploid? Robot?
I am a maverick hunter. Shadow, I can't forgive you.
Whoops, sorry X. Anyway, as you can imagine then, my earliest gaming memories begin in that mid to late 1990s era, when the Super Nintendo was at its peak, the Sony PlayStation 1 was just coming out, and the Nintendo 64 wasn't too far behind. Those, along with the NES and some Atari 2600 here and there, were the systems that dominated my early years. Yes, that's right, I resided in a Nintendo and PlayStation family. For whatever reason, I had never touched a Sega console growing up. I don't recall if I knew anyone that played Sega either until high school, when I overheard a classmate being like, "Hey, remember the Dreamcast? I love the Dreamcast controller." Sure, I may have seen a Dreamcast in the wild ones at Toys R Us. I had no idea what I was looking at. I believe that was the day my uncle picked up Star Wars Rogue Squadron for N64, so I guess that was where our priorities lied. Oh yeah, my family, especially my mom, are big into Star Wars and other sci-fi shows like Doctor Who and Star Trek. I was also exposed to 80s cartoons like G.I. Joe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and Transformers Gen 1. Especially the awesome animated movie that my family still watches a lot to this day. All of that thanks to my family. Yep, I have a nerd for a mom, and I'm thankful for it. It wasn't until a handful of years ago that I finally bought my own Sega consoles and gained a greater appreciation for them. To this day, I'm still catching up on those libraries. I had completely missed the boat. Though, in hindsight, now knowing the history of how poorly the Saturn especially fared in North America, it makes sense. Instead, the first video game console I ever played was my parents' Super Nintendo. In fact, the very same one you saw in the intro. Thus, my gaming journey began during my toddler years. My mom, and later on my uncle, being key figures in introducing me to the world of video games. Now, we're talking about a period that took place a very, very long time ago, and remembering one's toddler years is often a difficult task, so I'm not going to remember everything. Nevertheless, through the fog of my memory, some cherished moments of the first games I played do remain, so I want to share some of those today. For you guys and gals at home, tell me in the comments, what were some of your favorite first games that you played before Mega Man? And if Mega Man was your first, which one was it? Even though I'm known as the Mega Man guy among my friends, family, and those of you at home, I didn't actually get introduced to the Blue Bomber until sometime after I turned 5 years old. So what did I play during the first 4 years then? I narrowed that list down to 3 key Super Nintendo titles that I do remember playing on my parents' system, along with a handful of honorable mentions. Strap in for the long haul. We're gonna be here a while. Naturally, I have to mention the game that came bundled with every system, Super Mario World. Woohoo! Mario's first 16-bit adventure when Yoshi hatched into the scene was my introduction to the series. Although, I did get to try all the 8-bit games as well, not too long thereafter. I immediately fell in love with the colorful graphics that look straight out of a cartoon, and of course, Koji Kondo's very fitting music. I will also say that the then new ghost houses have the best spooky vibes, both aesthetically and musically in Mario World. This game, along with the next one I'll talk about, schooled me in how a 2D platformer should feel to play. Tight and responsive, with a sprinkle of cool moves for good measure. Furthermore, this was one of my first introductions to the concept of finding secrets, whether it be for alternate paths or secret level exits, because hoo boy did Mario World have a lot of those. It's still crazy and hilarious that you can skip all the way to Bowser's Castle if you go through the Star Road. Even Mario Bros. 3 with its warp whistles that my uncle eagerly taught me how to obtain didn't go quite that far, because in Mario Bros. 3 you still had to conquer all of World 8, which was quite the challenge for my uncle and I, even in 2-player mode. But hey, we did succeed in the end. Alright. Yep, lots of memories here and there playing the early Mario titles with him. For example, my uncle used to claim he could speedrun Mario Bros. 2 in 15 minutes, as he beat it in front of me. Although, I never thought to time him. This was before I was aware of the speedrunning communities online, but if his claim was true, he could always try to get into the top 300 players on speedrun.com last I checked. Another title filled with secrets galore that was as fun as a barrel of monkeys was, you guessed it, Donkey Kong Country. A definite contender for one of my first ever video games, as I do have a memory of playing this on my parents' Super Nintendo while my dad watched from his recliner. My dad has never been much of a gamer. In fact, I remember him complaining about his hands cramping after playing some Super Smash Bros. Or along those lines. I think he was more of a Tetris guy. I definitely do remember playing head to head against him at one point in Tetris Plus on the PlayStation 1. But regardless, it's the thought that counts, and he was incredibly supportive of my gaming hobby. Maybe too much if you ask my mom. Getting back to DKC, even though it is decidedly more linear than Mario World, it's still a barrel blast to come back and replay, especially as you improve through practice. Trying to find new secrets or simply using the knowledge and skills you obtain to see how fast you can rush through a stage are both satisfying and remind me of an element of what makes the Mega Man series so great. Games like these are definitely meant to be replayed. As you begin to learn the optimal strats, become more familiar with the game's mechanics, memorize the enemy placements and stage layouts, and more. Often, the replay is more fun than the first run. Elevating the whole experience is David Wise and Evelyn Novakovic's music that transcends the universe itself and immerses you in the game world like no other, making you feel like you are actually there in the jungles or underwater. This point has been beaten to death online already, so I'm really just singing to the chorus here, but in case you don't know what I mean, just go download that fancy new Nintendo Music app and listen to the DKC soundtrack. You owe it to yourself. One listen of tracks like Aquatic Ambience will help you understand exactly what I mean. I won't say I had the capacity to fully appreciate the soundtrack as a toddler, but looking back as time went on, DKC would be a game that made me realize, oh snap, video game music can actually be good. Really good. Oh yes, a precursor to my enjoyment of Mega Man music later on. And that's why, to this day, 90% of the music on my playlist is video game music. Thanks, Donkey Kong. All that said, If I could go back and describe the very first thing I remember, it would be sitting on the carpet floor in front of the TV, watching my mom play the original Star Fox. The intro sequence with the R-Wings flying through a wireframe hangar, accompanied by the emergency voice, is forever burned into my mind. That's right, from the word go, I was already getting introduced to the beginnings of 3D gaming. Certainly, the graphics have not aged all that well, and the Super Nintendo chugs at 15 FPS the whole time. Just like when I'm playing Pokemon Violet. Some things never change. But even so, this was a revelation to experience, when I otherwise only had access to traditional 2D games. It's one of those you had to be there moments. Going from 2D to something like Star Fox to the 3D games on the PlayStation 1 or Nintendo 64 was a giant leap forward, the magnitude of which we may never see again in the industry. My college professor in video production class used to tell us, "You guys were born at the right time," referring to the huge advancements in technology that have made our lives and jobs easier today. Well, he may have been right in another way, as my generation may be one of the last to experience what life, and in this case, video games, were like before the technological boom going into the 2000s era, before smartphones and social media took over our lives, and our minds too. It is staggering by how much the gaming industry has advanced in a few short decades, and now we find ourselves in an era of diminishing returns graphically, with people wondering what the next step is going to be. It makes me think of the future generations of children that won't know or have any appreciation of where we came from and how we got to have all these fancy things that we take for granted today. But I suppose that's why we have classes, books, and videos to help educate. Not all of the concepts that we have endured over the years are good ones after all. Right now in history, we're witnessing the pitfalls of live service games thanks to the failures of games like Concord and the many studio closures and layoffs. Whether for a similar reason or not, gaming budgets are ballooning in size, and it is increasingly becoming longer and longer to make a game as well. And the headlines, you're hearing about games that take freaking 8 years to make. What? Even for us Mega Man fans, we used to enjoy multiple sequels a year. That's not even possible anymore. These days it takes a minimum of 2 years to make a game like Mega Man 11. As for mobile gaming, MegaQuint recently reminded me about Love Live School Idol Festival 2 Miracle Live, that's a mouthful, who announced their global version's launch and end of service in the same frickin' tweet. Holy cow, you cannot make this up. It is a cruel world out there, so it's definitely very important to learn about what did and didn't work. For as the saying goes, without knowing our history, we are doomed to repeat our mistakes. But that's enough being philosophical. The original Star Fox, despite its limitations, despite its flaws, it's still an awesome rail shooter for the time, and I think it still holds up today if you can get past the sad limitations. Compare this to another game I used to watch my mom play, Star Trek Starfleet Academy Starship Bridge Simulator. Another mouthful. You get some dogfighting action there too, but it's definitely more about the bridge simulation because, man, this is the definition of we have Star Fox at home. Meanwhile, Star Fox has you literally going through the insides of totally not Imperial Star Destroyers and taking out their cores, in addition to all the other epic space and interplanetary battles. And you know, there is something about those textureless 3D models that made them appear more menacing to me than they should be. That combined with the sound effects and foreboding music, and you got a recipe that gave me a good fright as a child. The sounds that play when the first boss appears in Corneria is such a good touch that puts me on the edge of my seat every time. These elements still haunt me today in some ways, but I see it as a footnote that enriches my connection to the game. I've been a long life Star Fox fan ever since. As for my mom, she may have touched Star Fox 64 a little bit, but the next time she would really play a Star Fox game was when I introduced her to Star Fox Zero through its co-op mode. As much as people like to talk trash about Zero because of its unorthodox controls, the co-op mode was a fun time that my mom and I enjoyed. A nice way to reconnect her with the series after so long. Zero did feel rewarding to master its controls, but only if you committed the time to do so, which was the whole problem. I liked it otherwise. I remember screaming at my computer screen when the first Zero trailer revealed that they were bringing back the Walker mode from the cancelled Star Fox 2. That got uncancelled around that same time. Hooray! Hopefully Nintendo can give this series another, less experimental shot sometime. It deserves it. Just, ideally, not through yet another Star Fox 1 reboot, okay? And now, it's Morphin time! Time for some Super Nintendo honorable mentions. The first goes to the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Once upon a visit to my grandparents' house, my uncle booted up this one, and it was my introduction to the side-scrolling beat-em-up genre. And I do mean side-scrolling because the action takes place on a literal 2D plane. So it's more like sandwiching a beat-em-up on top of a 2D platformer. Like many of its fellow games in the genre, the shakeups in gameplay come due to unique playable characters, as each ranger has their own unique weapons, attack patterns, special attacks, and Kimberly can use her weapon like a bow too. The constant fighting is broken up by a couple of platforming sections and required wall jumping. Oh sweet, that's pretty unique for a beat 'em up. Yeah, this goes way harder than any early 90s licensed game has any right to be. It's got some character too, such as Billy here, who can't look his enemies in the eye as he punches them, at least until he morphs halfway through the stage and gains some confidence. Nice touch. The difficulty for the side-scrolling levels was just right too. Well, until the insane difficulty spike when it turns into a full-on fighting game using the Megazord at the end. Although, I never got far enough to see that finale as a youngling, since my early memory stops during Area 4. If only I kept going, since this game is very short. I beat it in about an hour on stream recently. There are 5 areas, just enough to show off each ranger, and then a couple Megazord fights at the end. There's nothing wrong with short and sweet though. However, the true highlight was the rock-hard soundtrack. From the surprisingly amazing rendition of the show's main theme, to the catchy Ranger Select music, yep, that there is a quality character select screen, to the tunes for the stages that sound like they could have come from a Mega Man X game. Turns out there's a reason for that, because while researching for this episode, I found out that one of the composers that helped on this game, Kenyo Yamashita, would go on to score music for both Mega Man The Wily Wars and, wouldn't you know it, Mega Man X3. Huh, small world. You may have surmised as much already, but I did indeed become a Mighty Morphin Power Ranger fan for a hot minute. I would catch the TV show after school. I've even once tried to roleplay as the Blue Ranger at the school playground. Yep, don't let my avatar fool you. Blue is my true favorite color. Though I don't know if my interest was because of the game or from watching the movie a million times since we owned it on VHS. Maybe both. But I do know that nowadays, it's the game that I look back on most fondly. Man, oh man, am I excited about the new Mighty Morphin beat 'em up that has just dropped a few days ago. Oh. Another notable game was Mickey Mania, the timeless adventures of Mickey Mouse. The game that's got everyone talking, the box says. Honestly, I see Castle of Illusion get way more recognition online. The box also claims this has the greatest gameplay ever for the greatest Disney character of all time. I don't know about either of those claims. The best character is Darkwing Duck. And no, it's not just because his game is basically a Mega Man clone. Anyway, Mickey Mania is a neat little platformer on the surface. It starts off with Steamboat Willie, which is notably in the public domain now, then proceeds to take you on a journey throughout Mickey's animation history. My mom and I never got super far into this though, and playing it on stream, I immediately understood why. These skeletons spawn a ridiculous amount of projectiles that's hard to dodge. It throws a Turbo Tunnel style auto-scroller at you, which I'm pretty sure that's where I got stopped as a kid. I could not beat this. Until now, haha. And the nail in the coffin is that once you run out of continues, that's all folks, it's back to the title screen with you with no hope to continue. On the stream, I could not find a password system at all, but apparently a level select does exist by doing some kind of code with the sound test, which means I would have never found that as a kid, so big oof for me. At least there are lives and continues, I guess, so I'm sure it's doable with some persistence. I will at least give props to the graphics and sprite work that are appropriately well done. We initially rented this from a Hollywood video store. Remember those? It's basically Blockbuster but for video games. At least to me it was. And later on we decided to buy the game. In fact, the Hollywood video stickers are still on my cartridge. They even damaged the carts to put an engraving, property of Hollywood Video. Well, guess what? You guys are out of business, so it's my property now. Ha 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 ha! This engraving likely devalues the game in a collector's eyes, but to me, this does add some extra history to this specific copy of the game, and I think that's neat. I do have one more game that I bought from Hollywood Video, but I suppose I'll save that for a future episode. As I mentioned earlier, my mom is a sci-fi fan, and that means the Star Trek Flight Simulator wasn't the only game she got. I also remember watching her play Star Trek The Next Generation Futures Past. That has you assemble an away team and touch down on planets. Set your phasers to kill. Of course, you can't go wrong with good old Tetris. And indeed, my mom owned the Tetris and Dr. Mario combo cartridge. So here's my introduction to both of those puzzle titles. I would later play the NES version and Tetris Plus on the PS1 with its catchy music, head to head with my dad, uncle, and mom. Ah yes, the time when I dreamed of having a pet fish of all things. That is a character arc of its own. One time my family went fishing and I actually caught a couple fish. I had them put in a plastic bag with the intention of making them my pet fish finally, but you know, I caught them on a hook, so they didn't exactly make the trip home alive. A very sad night indeed, and my first experience holding a fish funeral. Oh well, I would at least get my wish a little bit later in life through numerous betta fishes, and my grandparents had an aquarium at one point too. Those are always so cool to look at. Okay, I'm swimming off topic again. Now hey, who doesn't love Scooby-Doo? Where is that good boy? Oh, there he is, in this Scooby-Doo Mystery game, developed by Argonaut Software, you know, one of the co-developers of Star Fox. What's more, this was licensed by Sunsoft, who I would later know for making Blaster Master. Sunsoft sure gets around, as you'll see later. This one has you control Shaggy and Scoob as they try to avoid traps and frights from the level's monster as they search for enough clues to solve the case. And you know, maybe make some Sammies and cook some chicken alive as well. You know, normal Scooby snacks. No jokes here. They refer to the sandwiches as Scooby snacks on the back of the box. Oh, okay, that's all the confirmation I needed to know. I will also say I have never seen characters laugh their butt off from falling from a tall height. Usually that kills them. And dang, soap is powerful in this game. Not gonna lie, most of my memories of this game was trying to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to do. along with my sister. So I'm not even sure I ever made it past the first level. Maybe once? As you can tell, this will be a common theme with me. I've certainly started more games than I've finished. Maybe I should make a series where I try to beat old games I dropped. Then again, that's what we call a backlog, huh? Might have to move this one up the backlog a little bit because I remember not wanting to put it down when I had to cut the stream. It sucks leaving a mystery unsolved. This next early childhood game is shrouded in mystery in more ways than one. Where in time is Carmen Sandiego? Yep, it's related to the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego series, a classic from the 1980s now ported to Nintendo's console. I remember seeing the show on TV along with the likes of Captain Planet. I recall my mom owning this game and watching her play through it for hours. But sadly, it's the only cartridge from her old collection that has been lost or misplaced during the passage of time. Even though it's not in my possession anymore, my strongest memory is of the box art, which is in the style of a classical painting containing strangely realistic looking people. It's unlike any other box art I've seen back then, and frankly, the vivid image of the box art is the whole reason I remembered this game, so that I could include it in today's episode. The game itself puts you in the shoes of a detective, as you use the chrono skimmer to travel through time in search of clues to identify the culprit. Taking a look at the game again after a couple decades is unlocking some core memories for me, that's for sure. I do remember the funny beeping and booping noises as you navigate the menus, and the drawings depicting people from history that looked oddly surreal to my child self. On the other hand, most of my old memories had to do with my mom doing quizzes on educational subjects, because it is an educational game technically, the topics of which went right over my head. Too complicated for my small brain. I realized after watching, however, that the quiz part may be a made-up memory or at least a jumbled one I may have confused with a different game. More likely in reality, I was simply watching her figure out how to progress and win the game in the allotted time. The Carmen Sandiego games do look like something I would appreciate better as an adult though, and after giving it a go for the first time in decades, I can say that in today's age, this is a good exercise in Google searching effectively for things like the author of a suspect's favorite book, or what country a historical event occurs in. The game is a test for how well versed you are in history and cultures all around the world, and I don't know how I would even know some of this information off the top of my head without memorizing the answers, since there's not that many choices to begin with. Have we as a society gotten dumber over the years despite having access to all human knowledge at our fingertips? Were people in the 80s and 90s more cultured back then as a whole? Or am I the uncultured one? Yeah, let's go with that last one. Woo! That took a few tries, but I finally caught the culprit. Sayonara, Linguini. Wait a minute. Let me see that suspect list again. Early bird? Just in case? Carry me back? Genius? Oh, god dang it. Is this what the Ace Attorney localizers were inspired by? Seriously. Lastly, we got another nugget from what I was into as a child, which was Thomas the Tank Engine. That's right, the goofy blue train everyone loves to mod into Skyrim and Resident Evil. Fun fact, my dad worked in the railroad industry at the time, and it was an early childhood dream of mine to follow in his footsteps. Around that time period, there was a little school project that asked me what do I want to be when I grow up, and that resulted in a little paper cutout person representing me, and he even had some little engineer clothes on it, because you guessed it, I wanted to be an engineer. Obviously my priorities changed over the years, but yeah, that was my first dream. So, as you might guess, over the preceding years, I amassed a sizable enough toy train collection. with tracks and different trains from the Thomas the Tank Engine series to play with. And it was awesome. Easily my favorite type of toys. Particularly the wooden sets where you could connect the trains to other cars with magnets, and the wooden tracks that had indents to make for easy travel. I still have fairly recently seen similar products on sale today in toy stores, though I can't speak for the quality of the modern sets. I used to dream of having one of those play tables that were designed for the trains, but alas, it wasn't meant to be. I had to settle for admiring the store displays that had them. But back to the game. Well, it ventures into the educational game territory once again, but not to the point of feeling like schoolwork at least. It's not going to throw math equations at you or history lessons. It won't be that exciting to play as an adult, but for a kid like me who was right in that age group the game asked about at the start, it was appropriate. The best part is actually the thoroughly authentic rendition of the theme song. Like, no kidding, I would not be able to tell the difference between the real tune and this one unless I compare the two side by side. It's amazing what developers could do with the Super Nintendo sound chip, a chip of which you can thank Sony for, funny in hindsight. Unfortunately, the Thomas the Tank Engine theme is super copyrighted last time I checked, so since it sounds almost identical, I don't know if I'll be able to play it in this video. Otherwise, it's a children's game that has you doing sliding and jigsaw puzzles, simple quizzes, and viewing stories, one of which is presented as a reading challenge because the other two are narrated, or at least you can narrate them. Which, man, and I thought Microsoft Sam was bad. It's pretty much on that level, but a lot slower. And to be fair, I guess it is for kids. The minigames I had the most fun with consist of the races that teach a young one the sacred art of button mashing. I remember being genuinely impressed by the graphics in these races. Looking at it now though, dang Thomas, can you smile any wider, bro? And lastly, the minigames that task the player to build tracks connecting Thomas to his destinations in the correct order. Almost like baby's first Sim City. Simple, but a satisfying enough way to pass the time for a toddler in the 90s. Yeah, that sounds like the game, alright. But man, some of these faces are downright cursed and meme-worthy. Okay, to be fair, it was like that in the show too. That's par for the course then. Welp, that about does it for my parents' Super Nintendo collection, before my uncle introduced me to even more later on. We're definitely getting to the Mega Man part now, right? No. Sometime later, my mom eventually came to acquire a Sony PlayStation 1. That, little did I know, was a result of a falling out between Sony and Nintendo over an unreleased CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. Happy 30th anniversary, by the way. My PS5 asked me to mention that when I booted it up today. If I thought the primitive 3D graphics from Star Fox looked cool before, oh boy, my world was about to expand further with this console's library. First up, likely the entire reason my mom got a PS1, the adventure game Myst. It was originally developed for home computers, but due to its huge success there, it got a PlayStation port as well. This is also where Sunsoft comes back into the picture, since they are the company that funded Cyan's development of Myst, hence their logo making an appearance on the back of the case. Myst blew me away for how immersive it felt. Exploring the initial island, solving the environmental puzzles, discovering all the machinery and what made the world tick felt strangely realistic for the time. Yet, for all the wonder to discover, it also provided me with a dreadful sense of isolation. Although this isn't a horror game, it lets you take your time and there are no enemies or real immediate danger. The environments were atmospheric enough to make me think something could jump out at me at any moment. especially considering that sometimes some random dudes appear before you through FMVs or inside of books to spout some nonsense I never paid all that much attention to. Goes to show you that I was just scared of everything back then. But in my defense, this was way outside of my usual wheelhouse, which were action games. Up to this point, I've never experienced a game quite like this before. To navigate the island, we even had the official PlayStation mouse that this game supported. Of course, it was the old style of mouse that housed a rubber ball and the sensors inside would track the ball's movement to determine your inputs. It worked, but it wasn't the most accurate trying to play on the carpet floor or my lap. You really needed a flat surface. Yeah, I'm glad we moved to the laser and optical mice. Can't say I miss the old trackball mice at all. Especially when the bottom housing would come loose and the ball would fall out on its own. Whew, that was annoying. I recall my mom made a good deal of progress in Myst, showing me how to get to the stone ship in mechanical ages, which was impressive. The puzzles were numerous and figuring out the solutions was no easy task. When I played myself, I was fumbling around, flipping switches that provided no response, and I was just completely at a loss of what to do without guidance. Heck, I still am. It made my previous confusion with Scooby-Doo Mystery look like child's play. Because it's true, you have to remember this was before the internet became super accessible to everyone. Not that we even had an internet-ready computer in our home anyway. That was for the more fortunate like my uncle. That's the whole reason we were playing Myst on the PS1 instead. No, for the duration of my life up until the mid-2000s, I didn't have the ability to simply look up the answers online, unless I went to a library, I guess. And all my information from the latest upcoming games to the tips and tricks came from magazines like Game Informer and guidebooks. Rest in peace to Game Informer, by the way. Truly an end of an era right there. I don't know if I can say those times before the internet were better, but I do miss not being spoiled on everything about a game before it even releases and discovering games I've never seen before at local stores. I remember when I did at last get internet access at my home, one of the first walkthroughs I downloaded was for Zelda Ocarina of Time, so I could finally get past that stupid water temple. On my uncle's old save file no less. So no, he's the one that got stuck there, not me. Because of the aforementioned lack of guides, while playing Myst, my mom would write down any clues and answers she could find on paper. And I'm talking like multiple pages of notes and drawings because that's how much knowledge the game wanted you to memorize. And we would repeat the same song and dance again when we later obtained Riven, the sequel to Myst. This time having a whopping 5 CDs you had to keep track of. Even by RPG standards, that is ridiculous. But at least we knew we were in for a heck of an adventure. Actually, there was a remake for Riven that came out in 2024. We ought to try that sometime. Nevertheless, I believe I can thank that time spent in Myst and Riven for my future interest in adventure and mystery games. Getting back to my roots though, the next game I remember picking up was the first Crash Bandicoot. If you want to talk about images burned into my brain, the screenshot featuring the wooden support beams from the level with the invisible bridge has always been a vivid memory for me for some reason. Maybe because it sticks out like a sore thumb next to the other screenshots. Crash immediately became the console's mascot in my heart at least, and he immediately showcased the benefits of taking a platformer into the 3D era. Although the level paths were linear, the simple act of moving around in 3D space was kind of my Mario 64 moment. Well, don't get me wrong, Mario 64 and Zelda Ocarina of Time were still magical experiences to me later on. It's just that the leap didn't hit me as hard as other people since I basically grew up with early 3D games. Harkening back to what I said before about children today growing up with modern games. Obviously, Crash 1 ain't no walk in the park. It was tough, and one wrong move could cost you a life. However, this was the point where my platforming skills were beginning to come into their own, and I rose up to the challenge fair enough, making it quite deep into the game on my own. Actually, this is one of the few games I ended up beating as a child. However, it was also around the time I was introduced to cheating devices like Game Shark, so yeah, I ended up cheating to beat Dr. Cortex. Therefore, saying I beat it is a stretch. Oh well, rescuing Crash's lady and seeing the ending was good enough for me. In terms of my very first PlayStation 1 games, that's about all I remember playing during my pre-K years. But you know, I can't shake the feeling I may be forgetting somebody.
It's tail time.
Oh, right. Him.
Here's Gexy.
Yeah, we used to own Gex Enter the Gecko at one point. I say used to for reasons I'll explain. This gecko fellow sure loves to spout one-liners and dated references, even for the time, that you'd probably have to look up a YouTube video to understand the context. Given that, for a 90s game, he sure likes to call back to the 50s, 60s, and so on. I remember thinking I was simply too uncultured to get it, because I was as a kid. Still am in some ways. I would often hear my family talk about a famous actor or another celebrity by name, and I did not know what the heck they were talking about, leaving me totally lost in the conversation. That is precisely what listening to Gex is like.
It beats the Matterhorn. What are you gonna do?
Don't tell our friend-shaped Gecko, but the real humor comes from the fact that none of his lines are jokes. He's just repeating things he heard through watching too much TV. Gex is the epitome of TV brain rot, the very same that our parents warned us about all throughout our childhood. Still better than social media brain rot, I suppose. Regardless, Gex is another contender for a PlayStation 1 mascot in my heart, though this console had a lot of options to say the least. This is Gex's foray into the world of 3D collectathon games, as he zips inside TVs that lead to the media world, each level being a parody of different television shows like Looney Tunes, for example. I remember liking the game, though that was a long time ago, so let's ask Gex to rate the game for us instead.
I haven't seen blasts like this since taco night at James Earl Jones' house.
Okay. Thank you, Gex. Why we would have a taco night at Darth Vader's house, I'm not sure. He struck me as more of a cookie guy. Rest in peace to James Earl Jones, though. Well, anyway, I had my fun with this game until one day, for reasons I conveniently don't remember, I got grounded and the game was taken away from me. When I did earn the privilege of playing it again, I remember excitedly grabbing the disc and running down the stairs with it as I couldn't wait to play. Big mistake. As I ran down the stairs, the disc flew out of my hands and with a crash, ended up cracked and unplayable. That right there is a certified sad moment. Yo, Gex, you alright, buddy?
It's only a flesh wound.
Well, unfortunately for you, Gex, I never got a replacement copy, so my time with Gex Undercover Gecko ended then and there. My family did at least buy me Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko a while later, which I think is the superior game overall. So that makes up for it, kinda. Although, I always wondered why it was Gex 3, not knowing that the first game was a 2D platformer. One of these days, I'll have to acquire another copy of Undercover Gecko just to make it up to my poor past self. No doubt, I would come to play a lot more games beyond this, but that won't be until the end of today's story. Like a lot of PlayStation 1 owners, I have countless memories trying out the numerous demo discs from magazines, the famous Pizza Hut demo disc, and more. Since, when your family doesn't have the finances to buy everything, you can at least try the demos, look at the included trailers, and dream. Alright, at this point, you've learned about my first gaming experiences, got a glimpse into where I come from and my tastes. Now, are you ready? We're finally getting to the Mega Man part. It was around the time I turned 5 years old and was entering kindergarten that my family received the worst news possible. My dad had lost his railroad job. Now facing a financial crisis, my dad would make the decision to enlist in the military, which didn't last long, as 4 months into his new career, he broke his leg and the military found out that they shouldn't have taken him in the first place because he has flat feet. How they missed that during the initial health screening is beyond me, so it wasn't long after until they sent him home. Nevertheless, while all this chaos was happening, my mom, sister, and I moved across the state to live with my grandparents and uncle. To add to the tragedies, right after we moved in, my great-grandmother, who had often babysitted me while my parents were working, had passed away. So we had to go all the way back to have her funeral and grieve. Once we returned from that, I entered kindergarten at my new school, where I unfortunately ended up with a rotten teacher who discriminated against ADHD kids like myself. She even said as much right to my parents' faces. No chill at all. I would get written up for the dumbest things, such as the horrendous crime of simply smiling at the teacher. I was not having a good year. Thankfully, I heard that teacher got fired sometime after I left, so I got some vindication retroactively. However, the after effects lingered for years. My school didn't know what exactly to do with ADHD kids, so they considered me special ed, or at least a student that needed extra attention, until I moved to a different town in 6th grade, and then they realized I was fine because I didn't ask for help all year. Especially when I aced the English standardized test that year and went on to get a chance to take the ACT as a 7th grader. That was something. But you know what? I persevered the best I could, and don't worry, my family did get back on their feet in time. I wouldn't be here otherwise. One thing that kept me going was the fact that when I got home from school, I had many new games to play, thanks to my uncle. I finally got to play some NES and later Nintendo 64 games, and broadened my horizons on the existing Super Nintendo and PlayStation 1 libraries. Here is a montage of highlights I played before and around the time I discovered Mega Man. In the middle of all these games, me singing along to Backstreet Boys and NSYNC in the car, hey, they made some bangers, alright. And in between my uncle showing off his 15-minute Super Mario Bros. 2 speedruns, it was during this time that I eventually was introduced to a couple of little games known as Mega Man 3 and Mega Man X. I don't remember which of the two I actually saw first, but I do know I played Mega Man 3 the most extensively early on. And hey, I've already been saying for years that 3 was my first, so that's what it will have to be. In the next episode of Mega Memories, the journey officially begins with Mega Man 3. You will hear more about my memories in retrospective about my very first Mega Man game on NES then. As I close today, I want to try answering a question that's been in the back of my mind while revisiting all of these past games. Why have some, not all, but some people from my generation or older have given up on modern gaming and stuck to retro gaming? Is it the rose-tinted nostalgia goggles and the reminder of a better, simpler time? Oh, 100%. Is it because the modern era absolutely sucks of all the cash-grabbing exploits abound? No doubt, that's part of it. Something else worth pointing out though is that the AAA developers we know today were the ones creating these retro titles back then, working with each system's limitations to craft the most special game they could, and that extra creativity conjured as a result does shine through. Nowadays, the rules of what defines a AAA title has changed, leaving mainly indie developers to carry on that same spirit of innovation and experimentation that retro games invoked, except now backed by 30 years of game design optimizations. All the more reason why, when the bigger companies do bring an awesome throwback title or a new IP out of the woodwork, or heck, whenever Capcom finally does produce a follow-up to Mega Man 11 or the numerous cliffhangers and dormant IPs they left behind. Shoutouts to Okami and Onimusha. Apparently Capcom is working on reviving those dormant IPs as I speak. Same goes for if, say, Nintendo ever properly revives F-Zero or Star Fox. We ought to be talking about it, spreading the word, and supporting the official releases, especially if we want to help combat all the bad going on in the industry. After all, voting with your wallet is the most effective way to get them to listen. There is still some good happening in the gaming space. Sheesh. Astro Bot, of all games, winning Game of the Year at the Game Awards was shocking, but honestly, it gives me some hope that amongst the sea of movie-like AAA titles, games as a service, and microtransactions, that the fun first spirit the games of yesteryear invoked is not dead just yet. So let's celebrate those small victories loud and proud. Well, until Capcom does something then, I'll just be here reminiscing about ye olden times like the old fart I'm becoming. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you for the positive response to the Mega News finale video where I announced this project for this channel's 16th anniversary. It warmed my heart seeing all of your well wishes, ideas, and posts about what this channel has meant to you. On the flip side, I know seeing Mega News go on hiatus has been a bummer too. So I want to remind everyone that Mega News isn't going away forever. It will definitely return when something big like a new game happens again, and I may do focus videos on individual topics as they come up as well. For example, we just did a discussion talking about our thoughts on the secret level short for Mega Man. It was actually really good. I hope they make a full series of that one. As I said, the next Mega Memories episode will be on Mega Man 3. Before then, I'm going to stream the game here on this channel, which will also help me record footage for the episode. I will be doing this for each game I cover going forward. More details, including the date and time, will be posted on the YouTube community tab of my channel, on Twitter X, the ShadowRockZX Discord server, and my new Blue Sky account as well. Thank you all again, and hopefully since I will be covering one game at a time going forward, future episodes can come quicker. But if not, I'll aim for this to be a monthly series. So, see ya in February 2025, if not sooner. Until then, rock on and have a wonderful time zone.